good. Okay. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here in studio at the Aurora Municipal Center, and for those of you watching online right now. My name is Ryan Luby. I am the Deputy Director of Communications for the City of Aurora. Thank you for being here with us. I'll try to be brief here. We are here to discuss a stipulated consent decree and judgment agreement that the City of Aurora and the Colorado Attorney General entered into. All of this in response to the Attorney General's Patterns and Practices report that was released back in September. You will first hear from Attorney General Phil Weiser. He's standing next to us here. Then Aurora City Manager Jim Twombly, followed by Aurora Police Chief Vanessa Wilson and Aurora Fire Rescue Chief Fernando Gray. They will each make some brief remarks, and then we will, of course, take your questions. But for now, I will turn it over to Mr. Attorney General.
Thank you all. Good afternoon. Let me begin by sharing that my thoughts and all of us at the Department of Law are with those victims from yesterday and their families, and our appreciation for Aurora's police department and the courageous officers who are now involved in protecting the people of this great city. I'm pleased to be here today, and I really want to start on a note of gratitude for the City of Aurora, for City Manager Jim Twombly, for Police Chief Vanessa Wilson, Fire Chief Fernando Gray, Dan Brotzman, City Attorney, and Julie Heckman, Deputy City Attorney, for putting in the hard work that brings us here today. I also appreciate our Department of Law team, Solicitor General Eric Olson, who's with us. We also have our Deputy Attorney General, Janet Drake, as a core member of the team. She's not here today. So many others also put in serious, thorough, and careful work to bring us to today's draft consent decree that we are pleased to discuss with you. I want to underscore that we're here because of a choice that Aurora made to collaborate with our department, Department of Law, to elevate policing and improve public safety here in Aurora. This is an important path chosen by the city, and it reflects the principles and the goals of the leaders you'll be hearing from today, goals to support law enforcement, the fire and rescue agencies, and to build trust between the people of Aurora and its law enforcement agencies. We released a report a couple months ago coming from a place of concern. How can we do better to protect public safety? How can we treat everybody fairly in the city of Aurora? Today, we're announcing a plan to deliver on that concern and on the promise that we can and must do better. In the draft consent decree that we are releasing today, both Aurora and the state are setting forth a framework that will address issues addressed in the report. First, creating specific guidance for police officers on how to exercise discretion during interactions with the community where there could be perceived or actual bias. Second, improving the use of force, creating policies and training that will ensure it's only done when necessary and appropriate, and there's not unnecessary escalation of encounters with community members. Third, promoting fair policing and improving the hiring of qualified police officers and firefighters that reflect the diversity of this great city. Fourth, developing a new system for collecting information and gatherings related to police interactions with the public as required by law. And finally, ensuring the lawful administration of chemical sedatives and requiring independent review of policies and procedures before ketamine could be used again. In each of these areas, the decree requires important work, coupled with accountability and milestones that the city will need to meet. In each of these areas, an independent consent decree monitor will oversee and exercise appropriate discretion to make sure that the requirements are followed. And that monitor will play a critical role in guiding and reviewing the work ahead. The ultimate goal of this consent decree is to elevate policing and to improve public safety here in Aurora. The hard work ahead is aimed at building trust in law enforcement that operates with a spirit of continuous improvement, a commitment to protecting public safety using legal and just means, and an awareness of the bond of trust between law enforcement and the community. Our vision of the requirements of this decree is putting Aurora on a path to follow rigorous best practices for effective policing. As Aurora works to do that, our department and this consent decree monitor will support Aurora. We're not interested in looking for technical violations or unnecessarily prolonging the length of this decree. Rather, we're committed to getting the job done and ensuring that appropriate progress is made. For those committed to ethical and effective policing, the ability of our department to oversee and address patterns and practices of civil rights violations is a credit to our state. Rather than leave this work to the federal government, Colorado's committed to addressing concerns here on a state level, where we operate with a shared commitment to making progress and addressing concerns that come up, and that's how and why we got to this agreement. The nature of this agreement is itself collaborative, with a structure that's focused on making ongoing progress and a mindset that we're in this work together. Here in Colorado, that's our spirit, that we're better together, that we work together to advance public safety, treat people fairly, and defend the principle of equal justice under law. That spirit's going to guide our work as we exercise this authority to guard against patterns and practice of civil rights violations in any future cases. And the collaborative approach used here with Aurora is a model for what we Coloradans can accomplish when we work together. I don't take that spirit for granted, and I am most appreciative that Aurora has brought us here today and is committed to this work. And with that, let me introduce Aurora's City Manager, Jim Twombly.
Thank you, Attorney General Weiser. And I just want to echo a little bit of what he just said about, I think, the importance to Aurora of keeping this local. We didn't have a Department of Justice coming in from out of town and working with us. We worked with the Attorney General's office. We consider them our neighbors. They have interest in us just like we have interest in how we move forward. And so I really appreciate that we were able to work as well together as we did. I appreciate the Attorney General's team that worked with us on the consent decree. Also want to point out our team and thank them, Jason Batchelor, Deputy City Manager, both Chiefs Wilson and Gray, and Pete Schulte from the City Attorney's Office, who all put in long hours along with the Attorney General's team to get this done in 60 days' time. If you've read the report, you know that there's a lot in there and a lot to cover, and both teams did a lot of heavy lifting to get us where we are today, and we appreciate that. I want to say that the patterns and practice findings were consistent with some of the things that the city initiated in terms of looking at ourselves through the investigation into the Elijah McClain incident, the 21 CP, overall review of the police department. These reports all kind of weave together and will help us as we move forward on making improvements within the police and fire departments. I want to say that Chief Wilson and Chief Gray have both been working on making changes, and I, again, will appreciate the Attorney General's office and their staff recognizing the improvements that we have already undertaken, and starting with the Chief's new way that was put in place over a year ago, through changes to policies that we've already made, changes in training. And so, again, it's important to us that the Attorney General's folks have recognized us for that, and we feel like we really have a head start on this consent decree. We're working currently with the Attorney General's office, collaborating again on selection of a consent decree monitor. This monitor, well, and let me say that I really appreciate, again, their approach in that looking at the monitor as a resource to help us through this, help us with implementation of policies as we move forward. The idea is not a gotcha sort of thing or boiling things down to minutiae way, but really looking at big picture improvements that will help move us forward. One last thing I want to mention that's really important to us, and I think important to the Attorney General, is the role of the community in this effort. And it's very important for us that the community be involved in defining where we go from here in terms of the police department. policing and community need to go hand in hand as we move forward, change policies, change training, and make these improvements. So I just want to say once again that I thank the Attorney General and his staff. They've been a great help to us in putting this together. And with that, I'll just turn it over to Chief Wilson.
Good afternoon, everyone. First of all, I'd just like to take this moment to speak directly to the men and women of the Aurora Police Department, as well as the residents of the city of Aurora. I know that this has been 23 months of pain, 23 months of difficult conversations, 23 months of change and reform. And I want to thank the officers that are out there right now protecting and serving and have chose to stay with this city and to do what they do right every day. A lot of things have come to light, a lot of things that we're not proud of, a lot of things that I had to deal with via terminations or even arresting some of our own. But I also think that we miss the boat when we don't focus on the good things that are happening in this city. And I need you to believe in this agency, and we are committed to make sure that we do everything. The AG's office, I want to thank them. They heard your cry, and they came and they did an investigation into this agency. And I can tell you that we worked hand in hand with them because we're not going to shy away from reform. And I can tell you that the officers out on the street are doing it with duty, honor, integrity, and realizing there will be accountability. We've done a lot of changes, and I'm looking forward to continuing that. To the officers on the street, this consent decree is nothing to be afraid of. And to the community, I hope that it shows you that we are willing to change, and they are willing to listen to you, hear what you want from us, and police you the way you want to be policed. With that, I thank the AG's office for their review. I thank the men and women of the Aurora Police Department, and I thank the Aurora community for their patience as we move forward. This is going to take time. We have a timeline that we need to roll out, but we're committed to making these changes, and I promise you that we'll be transparent every step of the way and allow you to know exactly what's going on in the Aurora Police Department. With that, I invite Chief Fernando Gray.
Thank you, Chief Wilson, for the introduction. Hello, everyone. I'm glad to have the opportunity to address you today about the enhancements that we've actually made in Aurora Fire Rescue since this report has actually come out. First and foremost, I'd like to state publicly that we will cooperate fully with everyone and each and every stakeholder that's in this room. That's something that's very critical to make sure that we move forward, and we're committed to that. The other thing I want to make sure that I mention is that over a year ago, we actually removed the medication ketamine from our inventory in our EMS system. And again, that was one of the focal points in the AG's investigation as it relates to Aurora Fire Rescue. One of the other things that I wanted to mention is the fact that we actually made the removal of the medication on September 15th of 2020, which again was over a year ago. And during that 1 year period, we've actually made a myriad of enhancements to include making sure that we have a new RMS system, a records management system, making sure that we not only have the methodology to make sure that we're administering the medication appropriately, but also supporting that with training. And again, we think that's very important. Please know, and again, this is for our community and also for our members, that our medical direction team has no indication or inclination to actually reintroduce ketamine back into our system. That's something that we're not proposing. It's not something that we're looking towards doing. The other thing that I wanted to make sure that I mention real quickly is that you can expect AFR to do three things. We have a culture of continuous improvement. We'll continue to do that. We'll make sure that we research and implement best practices. And also, we'll make sure that we're continually getting feedback from the individuals that are stakeholders in this situation. Our mission remains focused on providing the best service possible, and that's something that, again, it has not wavered during this process, and it'll continue to go on throughout the years. That's something that Aurora Fire Rescue is known for, is providing great service. And I want to thank the Attorney General for mentioning the fact that we had a lot of great men and women in Aurora Fire Rescue that were providing service yesterday during that tragedy. And again, fortunately, they were able to basically transport all of those patients to the hospital safely, and they're looking like they're going to have a good outcome. So again, that's something that we're really excited about. Now, I want to close by basically making mention and making sure I reinforce a couple things to the AFR family. First of all, I know that my expectations are very high. And again, I'm talking to the members of AFR. I know that the pursuit of excellence is not an easy journey. However, I want to state publicly that I have complete confidence in the fact that you have the ability to follow AFR doctrine. And for those of you that are not aware, one critical piece of our AFR doctrine is to make sure that each and every person that we come in contact with, regardless of their race, gender, socioeconomic status, regardless of any differences, they're going to get the best service possible to the best of our ability. With that being said, our members consistently meet this high standard and validate this confidence with heroic efforts each and every day. And again, I'd be remiss if I didn't say this. I'm very proud to serve as your fire chief. With that being said, I'll hand it over to Mr. Luby so that he can actually start the Q&A process. So thank you for your time.
What kind of timeline is there?
So the near-term timeline is the city has to formally adopt the consent decree. Let me let the city manager talk about that, and then I can maybe follow up the longer term.
The consent decree, a resolution adopting the consent decree will be on the city council agenda Monday night, the 22nd. We have mentioned the consent decree monitor. We have a request for proposals out for someone to become the monitor, to be selected as monitor. I believe those are due on November 19th. We'll go through a process with the Attorney General's office on reviewing those for potential selection.
And then let me add, the timing is going to partly depend on the city's ability to implement. There's a unique feature of this decree in that we're not looking at what could be sort of an indefinite period. It's to put in place critical policies and training and then to follow on with a 3-year oversight period. So the city is recognized for the work they've already been doing and is given the clear incentive to continue that progress in the areas we discussed.
So is the effective date then going to be after it's approved by council and after there's a monitor hired?
So this is an important point. A consent decree is a contract. I've already given my assent. Formally, the city council will give its assent. We will then file it with the court here and hire the independent monitor. The initial requirements are not dependent on the independent consent decree monitor. The city is on notice of what it is, and as we've noted, we're building on ongoing work. So that work is practically probably already going right now, and the consent decree monitor will hire as quickly as we can.
Does the agreement require sign-off by a judge?
As a formal matter, a judge will enter into this agreement. It would be hard to imagine a scenario where a judge wouldn't accept a consent decree that is signed off by both parties. So I think that is mostly a technicality, but it is part of the process.
Chief Wilson, would you agree that the consent decree is in essence calling for a culture change in your department? And if you do, do you agree with that? We'll start with there.
So I think from the very beginning, we have said that we're looking for reform. We know that the community is calling for reform, and the AG's pattern and practice was just one of many investigations. They had a job to do to provide some validity to what the community was saying and what they were seeing, and we're willing to do that. And the culture change is in effect, and we are working on that. We've actually changed our schedule on how our officers bid so that we are able to expedite the training that needs to happen so that we can get, as AG Weiser said, get this consent decree well on its way. And so the community can see that we are making progress. We're not going to sit back and take our time. We're going to hit this full steam ahead.
And then how difficult do you think it will be to change the culture in such a large organization that's been around for so long?
Well, I think that directives and policies are changing, and I think that the officers, a majority of the officers are very much willing to do that. They want to police this they want to police this community in a way that is, gives dignity and equity and inclusion to all. So I think that we're going to achieve it, and it's going to take some time for us to meet the benchmarks, but we're absolutely committed to working with the AG's office. Thank you.
In the agreement, it appears as if Aurora has not admitted to many of the things or all of the things that were named in the actual investigation done by the Attorney General's office. So why is that, and isn't that kind of contradictory, not admitting to things that, and then also saying you want to fix them?
As a practical matter, most times when you have a settlement, a consent agreement, you will have a party that may say, in most cases it would be a complaint, here it is a report, I'm not going to admit X, Y, or Z. I'm just going to say I'm committed to doing what's required of me to remedy the concerns. And so, given where we are, that is not a relevant discussion for today. The relevant discussion for today is the city of Aurora committed to doing what is necessary and appropriate to elevate policing, to improve public safety and trust in law enforcement? They are all in to do this work of the consent decree, and we've got a framework where we are both in that work together.
What kind of enforcement options are there if the city is found to not be complying with the terms of the agreement?
The consent decree will be filed with the court, which will mean it will be a judicially enforceable contract, if you will, and the court will have discretion overseeing it. If our office thought things were not being followed, we could go to court. As a practical matter, having this independent consent decree monitor is a critical oversight tool because, as noted by the city manager and others, the effort is to be there as a resource, as a guide, not necessarily looking to find violations, but looking to make sure things are moving on the right path. And here, the city has expressed every commitment to doing just that.
Can you give us a sense of how many people have applied for that independent monitor position so far?
No, we don't have that, and with that open until, I believe it's Friday, we could, many of them could come in at that time.
Have you received any at this point?
I couldn't tell you that. I don't have the answer.
Well, I'll tell you my experience, a lot of times people do wait to the last minute for such applications. So I would venture to say the vast majority of applications will be coming at or right before the due date.
Can you talk a bit more about that position? I mean, a lot of people are going to hear this and be like, what are they talking about? Consent decree monitor? That doesn't make sense to a lot of people. So can you just explain, like, what are we even looking for with that person? And then do they actually have some ability to come back on the city if some of these benchmarks are not met?
Yes. Yeah, the absolute principle is this monitor is watching, overseeing, keeping score, if you will. Are the milestones being met? Are they being met in substantial compliance with what is envisioned by them? And if there's a concern on the part of the monitor, the first step is to tell the city, we're concerned you're not meeting it, then there's a chance to address it. Ultimately, as noted, if our department has to enforce requirements of the decree, we are authorized and able to do so. The goal, however, is not to allow it to come to that. By having this monitor in the first instance with more of a hands-on role, we believe we're setting up the path most optimally for success.
City Manager Conley, do you have an estimate on how much money this is going to cost the city to implement this decree?
It's going to be expensive. First of all, let me just say that the monitor could be an individual or could be a team with specialization in the different areas where there were findings. It's going to be in the hundreds of thousands of dollars per year, I would expect. I don't recall if we've capped that amount, but it could be in the $200,000 to $250,000 range potentially.
And that's just for the monitor, not to include trainings that can be implemented or data systems that researches?
That's for that monitor oversight responsibility.
Can we just clarify real quick? Can you talk about the independent monitor division, which is separate and apart from the consent decree monitor? I want to make that clear.
Right. So the consent decree monitor will focus on the consent decree itself, the patterns and practice investigation, and the things that the department needs to do in order to successfully work its way through the consent decree. We have also, the council has budgeted for an independent police monitor, which is a totally separate function, which would be a monitor, probably an investigator and an administrator that would be involved in the high visibility, high profile activities of the police department, potentially uses of force, police involved shootings, things of that nature, where if you'll recall back to the Jonathan Smith investigation, one of the findings there was a lack of accountability, and what we want to build in to the process here with the department is someone with expertise that can raise their hand at some point and say, wait, I need to question this or I need to question that. It's, obviously Denver has had an independent police monitor for a couple of decades, I believe, and so we're also looking to establish that. And like I said, it will be different. We also have a police auditor that we've put into place that looks at best practices around the country and looks at areas where the police department typically has interactions with our community. They've looked at canine operations, they've looked at body cams. So that auditor is looking for ways to help us improve in those areas, sort of a proactive approach.
Besides the independent monitor of the consent decree, what is the police department agreeing to do under this that they aren't already planning to do? Like you said before, there's been other studies and other changes are being. This isn't also brand new.
Brand new from the patterns, from the consent decree itself? I don't know, Chief, or?
So in the areas we talked about, the diversity of the police force, in how force is avoided to be used in unnecessary ways, how to prevent excessive force through both training on the front end, review of use of force on the back end, how record keeping is implemented in a way that follows Colorado law, and how the use of ketamine or other sedatives is overseen. There's a series of policies, protocols, training, which will be a direct result from this consent decree. To the point being made, these issues are not new issues, and there are efforts that are underway to address them. This provides an enforceable roadmap to ensure that it happens in a transparent, effective, and reliable manner.
And as far as the hiring, does that require any change to the city charter or other laws?
Nothing about this calls for changing the city charter.
Quick question for Chief Gray. Could you explain how your crews have been impacted by not having ketamine on your rigs over the last year? We've heard from a lot of emergency medical professionals who've said, we need ketamine. And I'd like to hear how you guys have been impacted. Has it been a negative thing for you to not have that at your disposal?
So I think that's a really good question, and thank you for asking that. As I mentioned during my initial statements, one of the things that we did is we put together a proposal to get a new records management system so that we could capture data related to the concept that you just said. What has been the impacts of not having that in the toolbox, so to speak? With that being said, again, we're still capturing that data, and once we make a determination after reviewing all of that and doing an analysis, we'll determine if it has had an adverse impact. But right now, we're still in the data gathering process. I'm sorry? We actually have a sedative that has been in our system for over 10 years. It's called Versed. But I will say Versed is not just used for people that have an altered mental status. It's actually also used in conditions such as seizures. So again, we don't have a medication that is strictly earmarked towards managing in a situation where someone is completely altered.
For the consent decree, the council has been briefed on the consent decree, and we've met with them several times in discussions about approach to the consent decree, and they have it in their hands now to review prior to Monday. Pardon me? Well, ultimately, if they were not to approve it, I would expect that the Attorney General would go to the court and have a court-ordered consent decree.
Considering that the city council power is about to change and there's going to be new city council members, would it be better to wait for those new members, or is there any indication that they could then go back to new members?
We're wanting to comply as closely as possible with the 60-day window that we were given by the Attorney General's office.
Couple more questions.
Chief Wilson, can we ask you on a unrelated matter about, are there any updates from the shooting yesterday in Moon Park?
So first of all, I want to thank all of you for your prayers. I know a lot of people have reached out to me and are concerned about the victims in this. I checked in on 2 of the victims this morning that were still hospitalized. Their parents are asking that their privacy is respected, but it looks as though 2 of these victims are going to have a long haul ahead of them, and they were okay with me sharing that information. But their injuries were significant, but thankfully they're with us and they're going to pull through. We are working a couple different leads right now, and I'm looking towards being able to release some stills of some vehicles that we're interested in. If we are not able to locate them later this afternoon, we'll be releasing that to you, and I'd ask that you put those out on your social media platforms as well as your newscasts to help us with any other leads. But to those that have come forward, the community's been very responsive. I know people are wanting to do anything and everything they can to support these kids and surround them with love, and we appreciate it. But thank you.
Suspect vehicle, perhaps suspect vehicle, not suspect.
Correct, not at this time. So we are still working on that, and I'm hoping that there's, like I said yesterday, I need the community. People know what happened, and they know who did this, and I need them to come forward. And again, you can remain anonymous. If you're concerned about retaliation, if you're concerned about anything for your safety, we will protect you, and we will make sure that we get you with our victim advocates and making sure that you're safe, as well as working with the district attorney's office. Thank you.
One other question while you're at the podium, just on the other issue, just my last question.
Sure.
I just wanted to hear your take on the buy-in that you've gotten. When you came out here, your first thoughts were directly to the people who are out there on the streets. What kind of buy-in have you gotten? Can you talk about the feedback that you've gotten in reaction to the fact that all of this is happening?
To be completely honest, and that's what I try to always be with the community, you know, when the consent decree was announced, it was hurtful. It was a categorization of the department that a lot of officers and their families took personally. I think that they understand that. They understand who they are. They know what they're doing out there each and every day. And they know that we are going to comply with this and that we're going to move forward because the community needs us. And I would just say to any of the community members, if you see the officers out on the street, you know, if you just want to say hello and thank them for their service. Yesterday, they were heroes. So thank you.
Last question, please.
Mr. Roger, as I'm sure you know, in federal consent decrees involving police departments, the ultimate penalty that if the department isn't in compliance, that the Justice Department would come in and essentially, or the judge in the case, would come in and run the department for a certain period of time. It's happened a few times. Is there a penalty like this in this consent decree?
We have not placed any such, not sure how you'd categorize that, but sort of taking over provision. We have set this up very much in a collaborative mindset, that we are here to support the department, support the city, to help improve public safety and build trust in law enforcement. And that's the path that we are on, and that's the path we want to be on.